100 acres of American farmland. Rich soil, clear title, yours to own. Guess how much? $60,000. Total. That's $600 per acre. That's less than most people spend on a laptop. That's cheaper than a semester of community college. And yes, it's real. It's happening right now in 2026, in states most Americans couldn't find on a map. But before you start Googling land auctions and drafting your resignation letter, you need to know something. The cheapest farmland in America is cheap because someone before you already learned the hard way why it's cheap. Maybe it's the water, or the lack of it. Maybe it's the soil that looks perfect until you try to grow something. Maybe it's the town 40 miles away that used to have a hospital but doesn't anymore. I spent 3 months researching every state's farmland prices, talking to farmers who bought cheap land, and digging into the data nobody puts in the real estate listings. This is the real story of America's cheapest farmland, where it is, what it costs, and what it actually costs. Number 10. Wyoming. Most people think Wyoming is expensive because of Jackson Hole and Yellowstone vacation homes. Those people have never been to eastern Wyoming. Eastern Wyoming is a different planet. It's high desert, sagebrush, wind, lots and lots of wind, and farmland that averages $1,200 per acre. Let me put that in perspective. You can buy 80 acres in Wyoming for $96,000. That's a down payment on a studio apartment in Denver. What are you actually buying? Wyoming is ranch country. This isn't row crop land. You're not growing corn or soybeans here. This is grazing land for cattle or sheep. The stocking rate is low, about 1 cow-calf pair per 30 to 40 acres, depending on the exact location and rainfall. The elevation ranges from 4,000 to 6,000 feet in the agricultural areas. The growing season is short, about 100 to 120 days. You get cold winters. Negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit is normal. 50-mile-per-hour winds are Tuesday. But here's what makes Wyoming interesting. No state income tax, low property taxes, minimal regulations. The state government mostly leaves you alone. Water rights are complicated but established. If your land has water rights, and you need to verify this before buying, you're golden. If it doesn't, you're in trouble. Wyoming is an appropriation state, which means water rights are separate from land ownership. You can own 100 acres next to a river and have zero legal right to use that water. I talked to a rancher named Tom Bishop who bought 320 acres near Lusk, Wyoming in 2021. Paid $400,000 total, about $1,200 per acre. He runs Angus cattle, about 75 head. He told me this over a phone call that kept cutting out because cell service is that bad. First winter, I lost 6 calves to cold, not because I was negligent, because it hit negative 35 and stayed there for a week. Second year, drought cut my grazing capacity in half. Had to buy hay at premium prices. Third year, normal weather, decent prices, I finally made money. Wyoming doesn't forgive mistakes, but it rewards persistence. The isolation is real. Tom's nearest neighbor is 4 miles away. The nearest grocery store is 32 miles. The nearest hospital is 58 miles. If you have an emergency, you're hoping the volunteer ambulance crew is available and the roads are passable. But here's the thing about Wyoming. The people who move there aren't looking for easy. They're looking for space, for autonomy, for the kind of life where you can stand on your porch and not see another human being or building in any direction. If that sounds like freedom to you, Wyoming delivers. If that sounds like a nightmare, keep scrolling. Number 9. Montana. Montana is where the Instagram version of ranch life meets the reality of trying to make a living on land that wants you gone. Average farmland price in Montana, $1,400 per acre. Slightly higher than Wyoming, but still incredibly cheap compared to the Midwest. Montana has 2 completely different agricultural regions. Western Montana is mountains, forests, and valleys. Expensive and beautiful. We're not talking about that. Eastern Montana is high plains, wheat country, cattle country, where the land is flat, the sky is enormous, and the wind never stops. The big crop in eastern Montana is winter wheat. You plant it in the fall, it grows a bit, goes dormant under snow, then finishes in spring and early summer. Harvest is typically July. It's dry land farming, meaning no irrigation. You're completely dependent on rainfall and snowmelt. Average annual precipitation in eastern Montana is about 15 inches. That's borderline desert. Some years you get 20, some years you get 10. In a 10-inch year, you're not farming. You're praying and hoping your crop insurance covers enough to survive. The growing season is 100 to 120 days, similar to Wyoming. Frost can hit in late May or early September. Your window is narrow, but the soil, when there's moisture, is good. It's not Iowa black dirt, but it's productive enough for wheat and barley. Montana has something Wyoming doesn't. Small towns that still function. You'll find towns of 500 to 2,000 people with a grocery store, a clinic, a school, and maybe even a brewery. The sense of community is real. Property taxes are low, no sales tax. The state is politically conservative and very pro-agriculture. Here's a real example. A woman named Sarah Klein bought 400 acres near Circle, Montana in 2019, paid $550,000, about $1,375 per acre. She grows organic wheat and raises heritage breed chickens. She sells flour and eggs to restaurants and co-ops in Billings and Bozeman, both about 3 hours away. Her blog post from year 4 is brutally honest. 2020 was a good moisture year. I grossed $82,000. 2021 was drought. I grossed $19,000. 2022, decent moisture, $71,000 gross. 2023, another drought year, $24,000 gross. My income swings $40,000 to $50,000 year to year based entirely on weather I cannot control. I've learned to save aggressively in good years. I've learned to live extremely cheap in bad years. And I've learned that this life requires either a backup income source or a tolerance for financial chaos that most people don't have. That's Montana. Stunning, affordable, brutal. You're not buying a business. You're buying a gamble against climate with your savings as the stake. Number 8. South Dakota. South Dakota is the state people forget exists until they see Mount Rushmore on a list somewhere. But for farmland investors, South Dakota is quietly one of the best-kept secrets in America. Average farmland price, $1,600 per acre in the western half of the state. Eastern South Dakota, where the soil is better, runs $3,000 to $4,000 per acre. We're focused on the west. Western South Dakota is ranch and wheat country. The Black Hills dominate the geography. Outside of that, it's rolling plains, grassland, and big sky. The advantage South Dakota has over Wyoming and Montana is consistency. The weather is still harsh. Winters are cold, -10 to -20 is normal. Summers are hot, 90s are common. But the precipitation is slightly better, averaging 17 to 19 inches in the central part of the state. That extra 2 to 4 inches of rain makes a massive difference for dryland farming. The soil is variable. Some areas are excellent for wheat and sunflowers. Other areas are strictly grazing land. You need to know what you're buying. South Dakota has no state income tax. Property taxes are reasonable. The regulatory environment is friendly to agriculture. The state government actively supports farmers and ranchers. Here's what most people don't realize. South Dakota is one of the few states where young farmers are actually moving in, not leaving. Why? Because land is still affordable enough that someone in their 20s or 30s can actually buy a starter operation without inheriting it. There's a couple, both 32 years old, named Jacob and Emma Reeves. They bought 240 acres near Pierre in 2020. Paid $370,000, about $1,540 per acre. They run a grass-finished beef operation. They sell directly to consumers through a website and at farmers markets in Sioux Falls and Rapid City. Jacob wrote a post on a farming forum that went semi-viral. We left our tech jobs in Minneapolis. Everyone said we were crazy. Maybe we are. But we own land. We work outside. Our kids play in dirt, not on screens. We're not rich. Last year we netted $41,000 after all expenses, but our cost of living is so low that $41,000 feels like $70,000. We have no commute, no office politics, no performance reviews. We have drought, blizzards, and a steep learning curve. But we also have something most people our age will never have: equity in something real. South Dakota appeals to a specific type of person, someone who values independence over convenience, someone who's willing to work incredibly hard for modest financial returns in exchange for ownership and autonomy. The communities are small but functional. Most towns have basic services. The nearest city, whether it's Rapid City, Pierre, or Sioux Falls, is usually within 90 minutes. The biggest challenge is the same as Montana and Wyoming: income volatility. Good years can be really good, bad years can be devastating. You need financial reserves to weather the bad years. But if you're young, healthy, willing to learn, and desperate to own land before you're 50, South Dakota offers a legitimate path that doesn't require family money or going 6 figures into debt. Number 7. Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the state people drive through to get somewhere else, which is exactly why farmland here is so cheap. Average price, $1,800 per acre in the western half of the state. Eastern Oklahoma runs a bit higher due to better soil and more rainfall. Oklahoma is where the Great Plains meet the South. The climate is transitional. Hot summers, mild winters compared to the northern plains. The growing season is about 200 days in central Oklahoma, longer in the south. Rainfall varies dramatically. Eastern Oklahoma gets 40 to 50 inches annually. Western Oklahoma gets 16 to 20. You cross the state east to west and you watch the landscape change from green and humid to brown and dry. The soil in central and western Oklahoma is decent for wheat, sorghum, and grazing. It's not elite soil, but it's workable. What makes Oklahoma interesting is diversity. You can do cattle, wheat, hay, even some cotton in the south. You have options depending on your land and your capital. The property taxes are low. The cost of living is extremely low. A decent house in rural Oklahoma might cost $100,000 to $150,000. Your monthly expenses can be shockingly small, but Oklahoma has problems nobody mentions until you live there. 1. Tornadoes. Oklahoma is the heart of Tornado Alley. Every spring from March to June, you're watching the weather constantly. Tornadoes can destroy barns, kill livestock, and flatten crops in seconds. You need a storm shelter, you need insurance, and you need to accept that eventually, you'll probably lose something. 2. Oil and gas. Much of Oklahoma has active or potential oil and gas extraction. Mineral rights and surface rights are often separated. You might buy land and discover later that you don't own what's underneath it. Someone else does. And they can access it. This complicates everything. 3. Water rights and availability. Western Oklahoma is depleting the Ogallala Aquifer. If you're planning to irrigate, you need to verify water availability and understand the regulations. Some areas have strict limits on well permits. I found a farmer named Ray Hodges who bought 160 acres near Woodward in 2018. Paid $275,000, about $1,700 per acre. He grows dryland wheat and runs a small cow-calf operation. His farm blog is refreshingly honest. Oklahoma farming is cheap to start, expensive to sustain. I bought the land outright. I thought I was set. Then I spent $30,000 on fencing, $15,000 on a used tractor that immediately needed repairs, $12,000 on a well that barely produces enough water, $22,000 on a barn because I couldn't find anything used. By year 2, I'd spent more on infrastructure than I'd spent on land. And that's before a tornado took out a section of fence and scattered my cattle across 3 properties. But here's the thing, Ray is still there, still farming. Because once you get the infrastructure built, once you survive the initial capital drain, the operating costs are low enough that you can actually make money. Oklahoma is for people with cash reserves or access to credit. If you can afford the upfront infrastructure investment, the land is cheap enough to make the math work long term. But if you're going in broke, hoping the land itself will carry you, Oklahoma will chew you up. Number 6. Kansas. Kansas is America's breadbasket. Everyone knows that. What people don't know is that huge sections of Kansas have farmland selling for under $2,000 per acre. Average farmland price in western Kansas, $1,900 per acre. Central Kansas runs about $2,500. Eastern Kansas, where soil and rain are better, runs $3,000 to $5,000. We're focused on western Kansas. This is wheat country, specifically winter wheat. You plant in September or October. It grows a bit. It goes dormant over winter. It resumes growth in spring. You harvest in June or early July. The soil is good, not Iowa good but productive. With proper management and decent rainfall, you can hit 40 to 50 bushels per acre on dryland wheat. With irrigation, you can push 60 to 70. The problem is water. Western Kansas sits on top of the Ogallala Aquifer, which is depleting fast. In some areas, the water table has dropped over 100 feet in the last 50 years. Irrigation wells that used to pump 800 gallons per minute now pump 200. Some have gone dry completely. Kansas is trying to manage this with regulations. Some counties have moratoria on new well permits. Others have strict limits on pumping. If you're buying land in western Kansas with the intent to irrigate, you need to verify current water rights and understand the long-term outlook. The good news is dryland wheat farming still works in Kansas. You're not dependent on irrigation if you choose the right crops and manage risk appropriately. The growing season is about 190 days. Rainfall averages 19 to 22 inches in the western counties. That's enough for wheat. It's not enough for corn without irrigation. Kansas has excellent agricultural infrastructure. Co-ops, grain elevators, equipment dealers, ag lenders. Everything you need is accessible. Even in remote areas, you're rarely more than 30 minutes from services. The small towns are declining but still functional. Most county seats have 10,000 to 20,000 people. You'll find hospitals, schools, grocery stores, and basic amenities. I spoke with a farmer named Dennis Pratt who bought 320 acres near Scott City in 2017. Paid $580,000, about $1,800 per acre. He grows dryland wheat and milo, which is grain sorghum. He also runs about 50 head of cattle on pasture ground. Here's what Dennis told me. Kansas is predictable in a way Montana and Wyoming aren't. I know my yields will be in a range. I know my costs. I know what grain prices typically do. I'm not getting rich. Last year, I netted about $53,000 after all expenses and living costs. But I own the land free and clear. My cost of living is under $30,000 a year. I'm banking $20,000 plus annually. In 10 years, I'll have enough saved to retire if I want, or to buy more land if I don't. That's not possible in most places. Kansas offers something rare. Stability. It's not exciting. It's not glamorous. But if you want to farm, actually farm, and build equity slowly and steadily without gambling your entire future on weather, Kansas is about as safe as it gets in the cheap farmland category. The downside is cultural. Western Kansas is deeply conservative, religiously homogeneous, and socially traditional. If you're looking for diversity, nightlife, or cultural amenities, you're in the wrong place. If you're looking for potluck dinners, high school football, and neighbors who show up when you need help, you're exactly where you should be. Number 5. Texas Panhandle. When people think Texas farmland, they think sprawling ranches worth millions. That exists. But the Texas Panhandle, way up north near Oklahoma and New Mexico, has farmland averaging $2,000 per acre. The Panhandle is flat, aggressively flat. You can see 30 miles in every direction. It's wheat, cotton, sorghum, and cattle, and increasingly wind turbines. The soil is decent, the climate is harsh. Summer highs regularly exceed 100 degrees. Winter lows can drop below zero. The wind is constant and intense. 20 to 30 mile per hour winds are normal. 50 mile per hour gusts are common. Rainfall is minimal. 15 to 20 inches annually. Almost all farming here is irrigated, and like Kansas, the water is becoming a problem. The Panhandle sits on the southern end of the Ogallala Aquifer. The water table is dropping fast. Some areas have lost 60 to 80% of their irrigation capacity in the last 30 years. Wells are going dry. Farmers are transitioning from irrigation back to dryland farming, which dramatically reduces productivity. But here's what makes the Panhandle interesting. Wind energy revenue. Landowners can lease their land to wind companies for turbine placement. Payments range from $7,000 to $15,000 per turbine per year. If you have 10 turbines on your property, that's $70,000 to $150,000 annually in passive income. This is changing the economics of Panhandle farming entirely. Farmers who were struggling are now making more from wind leases than from crops. There's a rancher named Bill Stanton who bought 640 acres near Dalhart in 2015, paid $1.2 million, about $1,875 per acre. He runs cattle and grows some dryland wheat, but he has 7 wind turbines on his property. The wind company pays him $11,000 per turbine annually. That's $77,000 a year he doesn't have to work for. His cattle operation nets about $30,000. His wheat adds another $15,000 to $20,000 depending on the year. He's grossing over $120,000 annually on land that cost him $1.2 million. Bill told a reporter, "The wind leases changed everything. I went from worrying about drought every year to having a guaranteed base income that covers my operating costs. The cattle and wheat are profit. Without the turbines, I'd probably be selling out like half my neighbors already did." The Panhandle is brutal to live in. The towns are small and shrinking. Amarillo is the only real city, and it's still just 200,000 people. Medical care is limited. Cultural amenities are non-existent. The landscape is monotonous. But if you can secure wind lease income, the math starts to work in ways it doesn't in other cheap farmland states. The catch is competition. Every farmer in the Panhandle wants turbines on their property. Wind companies are selective. They prioritize large contiguous parcels with good wind resources and transmission line access. If your land doesn't qualify for wind leases, you're back to trying to farm in an increasingly difficult water situation. Texas has no state income tax. Property taxes are moderate. The regulatory environment is very friendly to agriculture. The Panhandle is a gamble. If you get wind revenue, you win big. If you don't, you're farming in a desert with declining water. Number 4. New Mexico. New Mexico is where farmland gets so cheap you'll think the listings have typos. Average farmland price in eastern New Mexico, $800 to $1,000 per acre. You can buy 100 acres for under $100,000. Let that sink in. 100 acres. For less than a year of rent in most American cities. But before you wire a deposit, you need to understand what you're actually buying. Eastern New Mexico is high desert. Elevation ranges from 4,000 to 5,000 feet. Annual rainfall is 12 to 16 inches. The soil is thin, rocky in places, and low in organic matter. The growing season is short, about 150 to 170 days. Late spring frosts and early fall frosts are real risks. This is not prime farmland. This is marginal land that requires serious expertise to make productive. The primary use is cattle grazing. The stocking rate is low. You're looking at one cow-calf pair per 40 to 60 acres depending on rainfall and range condition. You need a lot of land to run a viable cattle operation. Some areas grow dryland wheat or sorghum, but yields are low. 20 to 30 bushels per acre is considered good. Compare that to Kansas at 40 to 50 or Iowa at 100 plus. Water is the defining issue. New Mexico is the driest state in the country. Surface water is virtually non-existent in the eastern plains. Groundwater is limited and heavily regulated. Drilling a well can cost $25,000 to $50,000, and there's no guarantee you'll hit water in usable quantities. If you do hit water, you need to navigate New Mexico's complex water rights system. Water rights are separate from land ownership. You can own land and have no legal right to the water beneath it. You must verify water rights before purchasing. So why would anyone buy farmland in New Mexico? 3 reasons. 1. It's insanely cheap. If you have cash, you can buy land outright without debt. No mortgage means no monthly pressure. You can afford to experiment, fail, and try again. 2. There are niche opportunities. Grass-fed beef sold direct to consumers in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, or even shipped to Texas and Colorado. Heritage sheep and goats. Lavender and other drought-tolerant specialty crops. Solar farming, leasing land to solar companies for panel placement. 3. Lifestyle. New Mexico is stunningly beautiful. The sky is enormous. The sunsets are legendary. The culture is unique, a blend of Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo influences. If you value space, silence, and autonomy over financial returns, New Mexico delivers. I found a couple, both in their late 40s, who bought 200 acres near Tucumcari in 2019. Paid $160,800 per acre. They run a small flock of Navajo churro sheep, a heritage breed. They sell wool, meat, and breeding stock. They also lease 20 acres to a solar company for $3,200 annually. Their blog chronicles the struggle and the satisfaction. We are not making money in any traditional sense. Last year, after expenses, we netted about $14,000. But we own our land and home outright. We have no debt. Our annual living expenses are under $25,000. We work outside, we see wildlife daily. We know every star in the sky. We're not building wealth, we're building a life. For us, that's enough. New Mexico is not for people who need financial security or conventional success markers. It's for people who are okay with barely scraping by, in exchange for complete autonomy, and a landscape that feeds the soul even when it doesn't feed the bank account. Property taxes are low. The cost of living is extremely low. The state largely leaves you alone, but you're truly on your own. The nearest town might be 40 miles away. The nearest hospital 60. Cell service is spotty. Internet is satellite. If you need help, it's not coming quickly. New Mexico is America's cheapest farmland for a reason. It's hard land in a hard place. But for the right person, it's also the last affordable frontier. Number 3. Arizona. Yes, the desert state. But northern Arizona up near the Navajo Nation and the Colorado border is not Sonoran desert. It's high desert grassland and pine forested elevation. Average farmland price $700 to $900 per acre in certain counties. Northern Arizona sits at 6,000 to 7,000 feet elevation. The climate is completely different from Phoenix. You get cold winters with snow, cool summers. The landscape is ponderosa pine, juniper, grassland, and volcanic rock. This is exclusively grazing land. You're not growing crops here. The growing season is too short and the soil is too thin. But cattle and sheep can graze the native grasses. The stocking rate is low, similar to New Mexico, 1 cow per 40 to 60 acres. You need scale to make it work. Water is the challenge. Wells are expensive and uncertain. Surface water is limited. You're dependent on stock tanks filled by seasonal runoff and precipitation. But Arizona has something other cheap farmland states don't. Proximity to major markets. Phoenix is 3 to 4 hours south. Las Vegas is 5 hours west. Southern California is 6 hours away. If you're selling grass-fed beef or lamb direct to consumers, you have access to wealthy urban markets willing to pay premium prices. There's a rancher named Maria Salazar who bought 320 acres near Springerville in 2020. Paid $240,750 per acre. She runs grass-finished beef cattle and sells quarters and halves directly to customers in Phoenix and Tucson. She charges $6 per pound hanging weight, which is well above commodity beef prices. Maria's Instagram documents the operation. She's built a brand around regenerative ranching, animal welfare, and connection to the land. She has over 18,000 followers. Her beef sells out months in advance. She told a podcast host, "I couldn't compete in the commodity market. My cost per pound would be too high because of the low stocking rate, but by going direct to consumer and telling the story, I can charge prices that make the economics work. Last year I grossed $112,000 on about 60 head. My expenses were around $48,000. I netted $64,000. That's a solid living on land I own outright." Arizona requires a different business model. You can't just raise cattle and sell to a feedlot. The margins don't work. But if you're willing to market directly, build a brand, and connect with consumers who value story and quality, Arizona's cheap land becomes a platform for a profitable operation. The lifestyle is appealing. Northern Arizona is beautiful. The air is clean. The night sky is incredible. The climate is mild compared to the deep south or the northern plains. The towns are tiny but charming. Springerville, Eager, Show Low. These are communities of a few thousand people with basic services and strong local culture. The challenges are isolation, limited infrastructure, and the constant water concern. But if you're entrepreneurial, comfortable with direct marketing, and willing to work hard, Arizona offers cheap land with access to premium markets. Number 2. Nevada. Everyone thinks Nevada is Las Vegas and Reno. 90% of Nevada is something completely different. It's basin and range topography, sagebrush, mountains, valleys, and almost nobody. Rural Nevada farmland in counties like Elko, Eureka, and White Pine averages $600 to $800 per acre. $600 per acre. You can buy a section, 640 acres, for under $400,000. But Nevada is not farmland in the traditional sense. This is open-range grazing land. Federal land surrounds private parcels. Ranchers hold grazing permits on Bureau of Land Management land that allows them to run cattle over vast areas. The private land you buy is typically the base property, the ranch headquarters, water sources, hay ground. You then lease or permit grazing rights on adjacent federal land. This system is complex and controversial. Environmentalists criticize federal grazing as subsidized and destructive. Ranchers argue they're stewards of the land and that grazing is necessary for fire management and ecosystem health. If you're buying ranch land in Nevada, you're buying into this system. You need to understand federal permitting, environmental regulations, and the politics of public land use. The climate is harsh. Cold winters, hot, dry summers. Rainfall is 8 to 12 inches annually. This is true desert. Everything is dependent on wells, springs, and snowmelt. But Nevada has massive advantages. No state income tax, very low property taxes, minimal regulation. The state government is friendly to ranching and mining. The landscape is stunning, some of the most remote and beautiful country in America. You can ride for hours and not see another person. There's a rancher named Tom Elkins who bought 800 acres near Ely in 2018, paid $520,650 per acre. His base property includes water rights to a spring and about 40 acres of irrigated hay ground. He holds federal grazing permits for an additional 12,000 acres. He runs about 150 cow-calf pairs. Tom explained the economics to me over email. My land cost was low, but I spent $120,000 on fencing, equipment, and water infrastructure. My operating costs are about $8,000 per month during the season. I sell calves every fall. Last year I grossed $230,000. After all expenses, I netted about $78,000. It's a good living, but you have to understand, I'm managing 12,000 acres with all the logistics that entails. This isn't a hobby, it's a full-time business. Nevada ranching is not for beginners. It requires significant capital, expertise in range management, and the ability to navigate federal bureaucracy. But for experienced ranchers or people willing to apprentice and learn, Nevada offers the opportunity to run a large-scale operation on cheap private land supplemented by low-cost federal grazing permits. The isolation is extreme. Towns are 50 to 100 miles apart. Services are limited. You're hours from hospitals, airports, and major stores. But if you want to truly be left alone, to operate on a scale that's increasingly impossible in other states, Nevada is one of the last places it's still affordable. Number 1. Alaska. Alaska has farmland selling for $300 to $500 per acre in the interior and Matanuska-Susitna Valley. $300 per acre. You can buy 200 acres for $60,000. That's cheaper than any other state in America. By a lot. But Alaska farmland is unlike farmland anywhere else in the country. First, the growing season. It's short. 90 to 120 days depending on location. But during those 90 to 120 days, you have nearly 24 hours of daylight. Plants grow faster in Alaska than anywhere else because of the extended light. Vegetables grown in Alaska can be enormous. Cabbages weighing 90 pounds, zucchini the size of baseball bats. The combination of long days and cool temperatures produces incredible growth. The soil in the Matanuska Valley is good, deposited by glacial activity. It's rich in minerals and well-drained. But here's the reality. Winter lasts 8 months. From October to May, farming stops completely. You're not just dealing with a short season, you're dealing with a season bookended by months of darkness and cold. Infrastructure is expensive. Everything has to be shipped in or flown in. A tractor that cost $40,000 in Iowa costs $65,000 in Alaska. Fuel is expensive. Supplies are expensive. Labor is expensive. The market is small. Alaska has only 733,000 people. You're not selling to millions of consumers. You're selling to a limited local market, or you're shipping products out of state at high cost. But Alaska has one massive advantage. Prices. Alaskans pay premium prices for fresh, local food. A head of lettuce at a grocery store in Anchorage can cost $5 to $7. Tomatoes are $4 per pound. Locally grown produce commands even higher prices because consumers value freshness and supporting local farmers. There's a farmer named Jason Reed who bought 160 acres near Palmer in 2017. Paid $68,000, about $425 per acre. He grows vegetables in high tunnels and hoop houses to extend the season. He sells at farmers markets in Anchorage and through a CSA program. His breakdown is fascinating. I grow for about 100 days, mid-May to late August. I use the rest of the year to plan, repair equipment, and work a part-time job to supplement income. Last summer, I grossed $96,000 from vegetable sales. My operating costs were about $32,000. I netted $64,000 in 4 months of work. My land and infrastructure are paid off. I have no debt. I live very cheaply in the off-season. This model works in Alaska because prices are so high that you can make a year's income in a summer. Alaska farming requires a specific mindset. You have to be comfortable with extreme seasonal variation. You have to handle isolation. Palmer and Wasilla are the main towns in the valley, with about 40,000 people combined. Anchorage is an hour away. You have to deal with wildlife. Moose will destroy crops. Bears are a constant concern. You need electric fencing and sometimes noise deterrence. You have to handle the darkness. Winter in Alaska is psychologically challenging. Seasonal affective disorder is real. Some people thrive, others break. But if you can handle the challenges, Alaska offers something no other state can match. The cheapest farmland in America combined with the highest prices for products. It's the ultimate risk-reward scenario. You're farming in one of the harshest environments in the country, but you're also operating in one of the most profitable markets. Alaska is not for everyone. But for the right person, someone tough, adaptable, and willing to embrace a completely different way of farming, Alaska represents the final frontier of affordable American agriculture. 10 states, 10 completely different versions of cheap. Some are cheap because of water, some because of isolation, some because the market is tiny, some because the weather is brutal. But they all share one thing. They're offering land at prices that make ownership possible for people who've been priced out everywhere else. The question isn't which state has the cheapest land. The question is which state's version of cheap you can actually afford, not financially, emotionally, physically, psychologically. Because cheap land always costs something. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Some people will watch this video and think it's impossible. That's fine, they're not built for it. But some of you are. Some of you have been waiting for permission to take the leap. This is it. Cheap farmland still exists in America, in 2026, for people willing to work for it. What you do with that information is entirely up to you.